Going through a spiritual awakening can be one of the most illuminating and uplifting experiences as a human, but that does not mean it does not come with its hardships too. Spiritual awakening is a process of confronting our illusions and the overall illusory nature of our existence. We will meet our positive aspects, our negative aspects, and everything in between. Now, a spiritual awakening is about getting to know ourselves on the deepest level. Even though I'm going to try my best to summarize a spiritual awakening for those getting onto the path or who need some clarity, you should know it does not happen as a simple step by step process. We are always coming back to solidify what we have learned in order to embody these spiritual concepts more deeply. However, we can gain a lot of peace knowing that what we are going through is not unusual, that there is a way forward, and that millions of people are experiencing the same thing. Now, before we dive into the different stages of a spiritual awakening, let's talk about what a spiritual awakening actually is. A spiritual awakening, put simply, is coming to realize that you are more than the physical, that you have a spirit, and then further along, that you are a spiritual being. The reason awakenings are often so abrupt and earth shattering is because they come in direct contradiction to what we think we know or what we have been led to believe is truth. We experience a battle between mind and heart. It's like being waken up from a deep dream or foggy state of mind. A spiritual awakening brings into questions our entire identity and way of being. We might feel incredibly unsatisfied, uncertain, and lonely from this place we dig for purpose. Spiritual awakening is getting in touch with a different way of perceiving or interacting with reality, an experiential one. Awakening can be very logical in fashion, but it also brings about a new way of processing things. You cannot deny what you're feeling in your gut, the visceral experiences you're having, and the ways you can hear your intuition. Sometimes awakenings come about as a result of a drastic life change that brings into question our priorities. This could be a sudden shift in employment or lifestyle, a heartbreak, a grief, or a complete apathy towards our everyday routines. Other times, we simply cannot ignore that sense in the back of our minds that something is missing, and knowing that won't go away and that we can no longer suppress. Awakening comes about when staying in ignorance is no longer an option. It just makes sense to confront what we are feeling into. Now, when we talk about awakening, it's important to realize that we are not talking about finding our soul or spirit, although we might use those terms at times, but reconnecting with our spirit and remembering what our soul already knows. Awakening is a deep remembrance rather than a search, although it can feel like the latter at times because we build up so many layers of ego that block the connection. Now, the sense that something is missing. An awakening is often characterized by this sudden realization that the physical world is not all there is, a spark of awareness that changes you forever. However, I do think there is a more subtle awakening beforehand, which comes in the form of noticing that something is missing. We might not connect all the dots right away. That does not usually happen. We read something or experience something that makes us question our outlook on life in the smaller ways first. We might dismiss or downplay these initial insights. Even if we cannot put language to it or are not aware of what is happening, we can feel that something is off. Another stage, a spark of awareness. When we talk about spiritual awakenings, this is the stage we usually refer to. This is an important stage of spiritual awakening, but it is not the whole thing. We can come to many awakenings, big and small, throughout our journey, and often cannot isolate a single moment of clarity. However, a lot of people do experience this seemingly singular moment of clarity or realization. A moment during a seemingly regular day where we take a huge step back in awareness, like having an out of body experience. There is this quote, and once you are awake, you shall remain awake eternally. We might be going about our usual daily routine, going through a deep introspection or sitting at our desk at work, and suddenly it's like we can see everything with fresh eyes. This is not what we want to do with our life. This is not what life is about. Once this spark of awareness has subsided a little, we might run through dozens of questions in our mind about existence, personal and collective identity, purpose, and daily routine. This is where our conscious mind or ego comes in and tries to make sense of everything, prompting an existential crisis of sorts. Ultimately, after some much needed pondering, you come back to your original realization. There is more than the physical. Another stage, going down the rabbit hole. Now, in this phase of awakening, we search out any and all information we can find about spiritual or esoteric topics with the sense that we are missing some crucial element. We might binge watch YouTube videos on these topics, buy spiritual books, find teachers that we resonate with. There is nothing wrong with looking for guidance and help at the beginning of our spiritual journey. However, what we lack is the discernment to distinguish solid information from flimsy or oversimplified information. It's a good idea to take everything with a grain of salt at this stage of your journey and be prepared to reconsider what you think you know consistently. What this phase leads us to is our own intuition. Having guides and teachers, reading books and articles is a great way to learn about spirituality, but the real work is in embodying these spiritual concepts. That missing piece we are looking for is that spark within us. When we are not simply consuming spiritual information as a form of intellectual stimulation, but taking these spiritual concepts and applying them in our daily lives to affect change. Another stage, feeling lost. Feeling lost on the spiritual path is a completely natural process because we are treading a path that has not been outlined for us before. We are trying to navigate a space without a compass or map. We are also battling between the ego and figuring out what our deeper motivations are. Now, through feelings, connect with our intuition on a deeper level and trust ourselves more. We might have relied on external information at first, but now we are more interested in going inwards. What we realize is that although spiritual guides, teachers, and books can teach us a lot, we need to do the digging ourselves. This is so that we can form our own organic perspectives on these topics, not consuming more and more information, but deepening what we already know in practice. Another stage, facing the darkness. Now, a lot of people claim that a dark night of the soul is a prerequisite to spiritual awakening, but I don't think it always works that way. Some people awaken after going through a dark night of the soul. Others face the dark night once they have already been on the spiritual path for some time, and others face the darkness in a way that is not so dramatic. A dark night of the soul is a phase during our lifetimes, often during a spiritual awakening, where we feel the weight of the ego and shadow heavily as if that is all there is. It takes great care and patience to hold on to hope and push through to the other side. We all have to face our darkness, our shadows, and our demons at some point on the spiritual path. It's not really possible to come to such a deep understanding of reality which uproots our current lives without digging deep and confronting the not so positive side of things. Oftentimes, we are told that spiritual path is all about becoming positive and raising our vibration. That can be a result. However, there is also a side to spiritual awakening that involves reaching down and setting some roots. We might revisit childhood dynamics, earlier adulthood experiences, our relationship dynamics, the way we move about the world. We might become more aware of the not so positive things going on in the world and feel great empathy. All in all, this facing of the darkness and reaching below allows us to set a solid foundation for ourselves. We are not going into this blind, and when we do go through difficult phases, we can face them with awareness. What a lot of people don't realize is that being humbled is a great gift. New lows equals new highs. As I said in the opener, awakening is a deep remembrance, not necessarily as such. We are not looking for our soul. Shadow works allows us to see the layers of ego we have built up that block our spiritual connection, all of our fears and doubts. Now, on the flip side of this phase, can all mean confronting the doubts we have about embodying our gifts. We see the fear and anxiety we have around showing up and being consistent. For a lot of people, this is terrifying too. This is what Carl Jung called the golden shadow. This is the positive side of us that is also hidden or repressed.